Welcome to the 2006 BreakPoint season. Everything is Indiana to start with. Back in the 2001 offseason, Keaton landed the top draft class that included an F5, an F4, and an F3. With these top recruits, they amassed an impressive 19 3-1 record and went to 3 championship games, winning 2 of them. Now this class has graduated, leaving a 15-point strength deficit for Indiana, which was only made worse by a draft class of only 5. Meanwhile, the Irish pulled in the top recruiting class, and the Kentucky Wildcats continue to rise, leaving the Hoosiers looking up. Who will take home the crown this year? The Irish, the Wildcats, the Hoosiers, or will it be a surprise team from the pack? Let's find out. Welcome to the new and improved Memorial Stadium for the 6th meeting between Butler and Indiana. Indiana leads 4-1 in the series, and Butler only getting that one win on a big upset. So let's see how they do. Indiana only has a 3-point home court advantage on Butler, and there's the new animation, and a break point to start out by Butler. That looks good, so that'll be 6 there. Cuts right into the lead. Let's see what Indiana can do. Their first roll in their new stadium is a 1. That's not good. And 3, so that means it will be a 0. Butler can add to the lead for the second half. Can Butler get them at home? Indiana hasn't lost here in a long time. They roll a 5. That's 11-3. It looks like Butler's going to pull off the upset here. Indiana for the second half roll needs a break point. They get one, so that puts them at 8. They get another break point. That's 10. That's 13. They have 1 and a third break point, and that's going to be enough. There's 17. Indiana is going to win 20-11 in exciting fashion, and man, Butler just cannot beat Indiana. Onward to Kroger Field, where Valpo takes on Kentucky. The Wildcats have a 6-point advantage plus a 2-point home court advantage, so that gives them a lead of 8. Valpo, first roll, hits a 4. Kentucky can run away with it if they hit a big number. They hit the 5. 13-4. Valpo needs a couple of break points like Indiana just pulled off, and they get it at the 5, so Kentucky's going to win this one. And really, to think last year, Kentucky did go to the championship, so they look pretty tough this year. Let's see if they can repeat. Onward to Notre Dame at Michigan. These two teams always have a fun one. Notre Dame and Michigan are tied 2-2 in the series against each other. Notre Dame with that huge 30 gives them a 9-point advantage, and they hit a 5 to start. 14-1. Michigan, an uphill battle on this game, and they only land a 2. So it looks like Notre Dame's big season is just starting off. Again, 30 is the highest, and here they have it against Michigan, and they're going to take care of business. 16-8 looks like the finals. Onward to Ross-Ade Stadium, where Purdue plays Tennessee, and this will be it. The first time one of these teams will get a win. Purdue only has the home field advantage. That's the only difference. Tennessee hits a 5. Purdue matches with a 5, has a 1-point advantage going into the second. Let's see who gets the first ever breakpoint win for them. Breakpoint by Tennessee. And they're going to add 10. So that'll be 15-6. Now, Purdue, can they do it? They got to match a breakpoint. They cannot. So Tennessee gets their first ever win, and Purdue is still looking for theirs. So after week 1, we see Indiana, Kentucky, Notre Dame, and Tennessee are leading the pack. Congratulations to Tennessee. Now we'll head over to Brown Stadium, where Butler plays Valpo. Butler has a 1-point advantage, and Valpo has a 1-point home court advantage. Let's see how this plays out. Butler hits a break point to start. Oh, hits a double break point. And they'll walk away with 13 to start. Looks like they're going to win. They came off of a disappointing loss against IU. So this is a good way to rebound against a difficult Valpo team. 10-point lead going into the second half. I believe Butler leads the series 3-2, and it looks like they're going to add and one more, be 4-2, as Valpo hits a 1. So they will add just one more point. So the final will be 19-5. Butler wins and rebounds after that unlucky loss against IU. Speaking of IU, we're back in Memorial Stadium, where the 29 rated Kentucky Wildcats take on Indiana. They have never beaten Indiana. They have a 4-0 win streak, Indiana does, against them. And now let's see how this plays out. There's a 5-point advantage for Kentucky and a 3-point for home court. And the first roll for Kentucky is a 4. So they have a 6-point advantage going into the Indiana's first half roll, which is a 5. So still has a 1-point advantage going into the second half. Kentucky hits a 2. That's 11. So they still have a chance. Indiana needs 3 or higher. And they hit the break point, and that'll be enough for the win. They'll just take the 6. 14-11. Kentucky loses to Indiana. Back to Neyland Stadium, where Notre Dame takes on Tennessee. Notre Dame has a huge 10-1 advantage, and the first dice roll, Indiana misses. And so they'll actually score a 0. So Tennessee needs a big number here to kind of make up some ground. A 3 is probably not going to do it. 10-4 going into the second half. And Notre Dame hits a break point. Multiply that with a 3, so that's an 8. 18-4. They'll need a couple break points here to come close. They hit a 5. Not a bad showing for Tennessee, coming off their first ever win. But Notre Dame will take this one, 18-9. Purdue traveling to Michigan looking for their first win. Michigan has a 1-point advantage for home field and 1 point for strength. Purdue's first roll is a 4. Michigan. There's a 2. They're going to tie it 4-4. It comes down to the second half roll. Can Purdue do it? Purdue hits a 5. So Michigan needs a 5 or a 6. Can they get it? They get the 3. That means Purdue gets their first win in BreakPoint history, 9-7 against the hapless Michigan Wolverines. The standings after week 2, Indiana and Notre Dame both undefeated. Meanwhile, Kentucky, Tennessee, Butler, and Purdue 1-1. So Indiana, Notre Dame, Kentucky, kind of what we're expecting, and maybe Butler can bounce back. Let's find out. So Kentucky visits Butler. Kentucky has a huge 5-point advantage, and Butler has a 1-point home field advantage. So let's see how this goes out. Butler has beaten Kentucky 2 times in a row, so Kentucky's never beaten them. Let's see if they can get their first one. It's a 4. So they take a 9-3 lead after the first half. Butler can get this win. They could actually jump right into the mix for the championship talk, but 13-3, it looks like they're going to need a couple break points. Butler will. And they'll get 1 break point. That puts them at 8 plus 1. So that'll put them at 9. 13-9. So Butler put up a fight at the end, but Kentucky walks away in the first time they've ever beaten them. All right, onward to Brown Stadium, where Indiana visits Valpo. And these two have a storied pass. They're even, 1-1 on everything, so this should be a great game. And Indiana hits a 3. Valpo hits a 4. Valpo has a 1-point advantage on Indiana. They'll hit a 4, so at 8-5. Valpo needs 3 or higher. And they hit the break point. Valpo upsets Indiana. I don't know if that's an upset anymore, how many times Valpo has beaten Indiana. Actually, the series between them with this win by Valpo is tied 4-4. A lot of those in championship games. Wow. Next, Purdue visits Notre Dame. And Purdue has a big advantage plus the 2 points for home field. The Irish beat Purdue last year, pretty big. And Purdue comes out swinging with a break point. Add 3 more, that's 8. That cuts deep into Notre Dame's lead. And Notre Dame responds with a 4. So Purdue is going to need 1 more break point to maybe have a shot here. And they're going to hit a 5, which will be 13, not enough. So Notre Dame will easily take care of Purdue. And the final will be 20-13. Next, we're off to Neyland Stadium, where Michigan is looking for their first win of the season, and Tennessee looking for their second win overall. Michigan has 1-point advantage, and Tennessee has a home field advantage. Let's see who gets it. Michigan hits a 2. Tennessee lands a big 5. Big opportunity, 6-3. Michigan, they follow with a 5. 8-6. Tennessee needs 3 or higher, and they hit the 1 for nothing. The next roll is a 0, so the final will be 8-6. Michigan beats Tennessee for their first win of the season. After week 3, Notre Dame stands alone undefeated 3-0, and Indiana and Kentucky are following it, while the rest of the field all has 1 win and 2 losses. Let's get to week 4. Next, Tennessee visits the Butler Bowl, and Butler has a 4-point advantage plus 1 for home field. And let's see what Tennessee can do, looking for their second win. And they hit a 5, eliminating that bonus, so Butler needs to hit a big one. And they hit a 1. Is that a 0 or a 1? It will be a 0. So now the lead's wiped out. Tennessee and Butler, second half for the win. Tennessee hits the break point and hits a 3, so that will be an 8. So a lot of pressure on Butler here. Tennessee, for their second win, they're going to get it. 13-9. Man, Tennessee is really turning into one of my favorite teams. They're just so scrappy. So Tennessee goes to 2-2, and the Bulldogs drop to 1-3. Back in Ross-Ade Stadium, where Indiana is visiting for the first time, and they have a 4-point advantage versus Purdue's 1-point home court advantage. And Indiana will roll at 2-6. So this is pretty open. Purdue could maybe get Indiana on the road, and they just miss. That's a 0 or a 1. It will be a 1. So still, Indiana has a 4-point advantage going into the second. Indiana hits a 4, 10. So that means Purdue does need a break point to win. And they miss. Wow, Indiana not wanting to make a rivalry with Purdue. They just want to keep drubbing them. So the final will be 10-2. Ouch. Next, Valpo visits Notre Dame. Notre Dame has a big 7-point advantage, plus 3 points now for home field, so that'll be a big 10. Notre Dame leads the series with Valparaiso 3-2, and Valpo's first roll is not going to be pretty. That's going to be a miss, and it will be a 0, and they're not going to have the same magic they had against Indiana. Notre Dame, they'll roll a 3, 13-0 with 1 roll. It looks pretty good for Notre Dame. Can Valpo do anything? They cannot. They only hit 2. So the final is going to be at least 13-2, and Notre Dame will tack on 5 more. So 18-2 is the final, and Notre Dame continues to roll. Onward to where Michigan visits Kentucky at Kroger Field. Kentucky has a big 8-point advantage, plus 2 for home field. And let's get started. Michigan with a 3. Kentucky hits the 4. So Michigan's going to need a couple of break points probably to win this one, and they're not going to get it. 7-14, and Kentucky will pile on, continuing looking really great. They'll move to 3-1, Michigan down to 1-2. So after week 4, Notre Dame stays ahead with 4-0, and Indiana and Kentucky are right there. So those are probably our championship teams. Meanwhile, Tennessee, the upstarts, 2-2. Really excited about them. All right, let's get to week 5. Now we have Butler visiting Purdue. Both teams only have 1 win on the season. Butler having kind of a disappointing one. They have a 4-1 advantage for Butler. Their first roll's a 5. So this looks good for Butler. Purdue, they'll hit a 4. So if Butler hits big here, it looks like they should put him away. And they hit a 3, 12. So Purdue will need a break point to tie or win, and Purdue hits a 2. So Butler moves up to 2-3, and the Boilermakers drop to 1-4. Next, Tennessee visits Indiana. Tennessee having a great season so far. Here, Indiana puts up a 7-point advantage, so Tennessee will need everything. First roll, break point for Tennessee. The next roll is a 5, so they put up 10. And they wipe that advantage right away. Indiana's got to be getting a little nervous here. They hit a 4, so it's a 1-point lead for Indiana going into the second half. Can Tennessee do it? Their next roll is a 4, so they've got a 14-11. They can do it. Come on, Tennessee. Indiana needs a 3 or higher. Here's the roll. And they get a 4. Are you kidding me? Indiana's win streak continues, and Tennessee falls. But what a great game. Next, the big game. Notre Dame, Kentucky, the two highest rated teams. Let's see how they do. Notre Dame has a 1 point advantage, and Kentucky gets a 2 point home advantage. So let's see how this plays out. Notre Dame hits a 4. Kentucky, second roll. They hit a 5. They expand on their lead. Notre Dame needs to hit higher than a 2 to have a chance. And they hit a 3, so they've got a 1 point advantage. Kentucky needs a 1 to tie or anything higher to win, and they hit the 5. So Kentucky beats Notre Dame and drops them to 4-1. Next, Valparaiso visits Michigan. They're both 1-3. Valpo with a 2 point advantage and Michigan with the 1 point home court. Let's see how this plays out. Valpo really having a disappointing season, and rolling a 2 there is not going to help. Really thought they'd do better, but 1-3 is just dismal. Michigan with a BreakPoint, and they're going to add a 7. So it looks like Michigan's in the driver's seat for this one. Valpo needs a big roll here, and they're not going to get it. So Valpo 1-4. That's not what I was expecting for this season. So Michigan will win here, and they'll add another BreakPoint. So it'll be 14-5, and that is the final. After week 5, Notre Dame, Indiana, Kentucky all tied at 4-1. So this week we'll really figure out who is going to the championship game. It could be any of them. Meanwhile, Purdue and Valpo bring up the rear. So it's a really 3-horse race. Let's get to it. Michigan at Butler. And Butler has a 3-point advantage plus 1 point for home court. And Michigan wipes it out with a 5. And Butler is going to fight right back, and they're going to have a 5-point advantage. Michigan needs something big. They're going to hit a 2, so Butler's going to walk away with the victory here and kind of salvaging a bad season. They were down 2-3. Now they're going to be 3-3, and so a 500 season for Butler. Next, we go to Indiana visiting Notre Dame, and it's pretty simple. If you win, you're in, and if you lose, you'll need a little bit of help with Kentucky losing in the next game to get in, and then maybe we might even get to some tie breaks. Let's get started. So Notre Dame has a 6-point advantage, and they'll add on a 3-point home field advantage. So that's 9 points that they're going to have in an advantage. Indiana needs a break point to stay alive. They hit the break point, and that's going to be 8. So Notre Dame has a 1-point lead. They're going to add on in the first half, and they hit a 0. Is that going to be a 0 or a 1? It is a 1. So now it is 10-8 going into the second half. Indiana needs higher than 2 to have a shot, and they hit a 4. So it's 12-10. So Notre Dame hits a 3 or higher. They go to the championship game, and they hit a, oh, you got to be kidding me. Indiana with the upset. It's going to be a 0. 12-10 is the final, and Indiana beats Notre Dame and is going to go to the championship. Wow. Next, Kentucky at Tennessee. So Kentucky wins, they're in, and I do believe they beat Notre Dame earlier in the season, so it looks like Kentucky's in no matter what, and they're going to add a 5 here, 14-1. Doesn't look good. Now, Tennessee looked great against IU, but they are falling apart here. They put up 2 points, so Kentucky looks like they're on their way. 19, it's going to need a miracle from Tennessee. They can't do it. So Kentucky and IU will be in the championship. All right, Purdue visits Valpo. Both teams looking for that second win. I can't even believe Valpo is 1-4. And Valpo has a 4-point advantage going into the first half. Purdue hits a 5. And if Valpo loses this, this will be a very embarrassing season for them. And they come out swinging with a 4, so 5-8. Purdue needs 3 or higher to stay alive, and they hit the 2. So Valpo will get their second win, and Purdue will end the season 1-5. So not a great season for either team. Hey, a break point there. Here's the standings after week 6. Indiana, Kentucky, both 5-1. Notre Dame 4-2, Butler 3-3, and then the rest of the field. I kind of thought Notre Dame had a good shot there, and it didn't work out in their favor. They lost to both Indiana and Kentucky. Kentucky already lost to Indiana, and Indiana lost to Valpo. So we'll see how this championship plays out. Indiana versus Kentucky, round 2. For the championship game, we're welcoming you to Soldier Field for the first time, where Indiana and Kentucky face off for the second time in 2 years. You can see last year in 2005, really Kentucky gave its all to hitting 2 break points in the first half, and then Indiana just came back and did it right back to them. And so really it came up just a little bit short in what was one of the best championship games I've ever seen. So now, Indiana versus Kentucky. Kentucky has never beaten Indiana. It is 5-0. Indiana's faced them 5 times and beaten them 5 times. Kentucky has a 5-point advantage this time, 29-24. And so here comes Indiana's first roll. Indiana hits a 4, cuts into that advantage. Kentucky can add up really fast here. Kentucky hits a 2. So 7-4, it's still a match. Indiana needs 3 or higher to have a shot. Indiana hits a 4, so it is 8-7. They need Kentucky to miss. Kentucky, for the championship, they need a 1 or higher, and they hit a break point. They won't take a second roll. That'll do it. 13-8. Kentucky finally beats Indiana. Yeah, they are the national champions. 2006 BreakPoint champs, Kentucky Wildcats beating Indiana. This is pretty exciting for Kentucky. It was, I kind of like it when the teams really build up and they get to this point where they just kind of bubble over. Kentucky started out just okay in 2003, and from there, they've just gotten better every season. So well-deserved. Great win over Indiana. I think Notre Dame and Butler had a poor season. Here's some stats. So thank you for watching. 2006 season, pretty good. But we got more coming in 2007. So please check out the 2006 off-season video coming out soon.